And we've got not a really good game, but a decent game to talk about. Vikings over the Titans.
It kind of felt boring for a little bit.
It did, yeah. I had my wife's sister and her family were here watching with us. And yeah, I mentioned to my brother-in-law several times, it's just kind of a blah game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and the Vikings were moving the ball. They were more effective at moving the ball. And they actually scored points after moving the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Scored a few touchdowns, which was nice.
And outside of one awful miscommunication really early in the game, no turnovers.
Yeah.
No interceptions for sure, and just the one mishandled pitch that was technically a fumble by Sam Darnold.
Yeah, credited to Sam Darnold.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to complain, and I hope we're not coming off as complaining, but it's hard to complain about a boring win. Yeah, with those ones, it's easy to come up with, oh, well, they're terrible because of this, or they're not going to win a playoff game because of that. And you know what? Sometimes you just win a game and you go to work the next day. It's just, this wasn't a crazy highlight game, but there were some good things, some reasons to be happy, and there you go.
Yeah. Should we get into some roses and thorns?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Did you have any roses off the bat?
Well, I'm just going to steal the one that you have on here already because I was thinking it. Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Man, he looked great. Played arguably the best game of his career, aside from that miscue with the pitch on whatever it was, the third play of the game or whatever. But he was 20 of 32 for 246 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and then he also had a rushing touchdown, carried the ball 8 times for 18 yards, didn't throw a pick, coming off a game where he threw 3.
Yeah.
So that was good to see. And he seemed, and we were texting throughout the game like we normally do, it just seemed comfortable in the pocket. Seemed comfortable not just sitting there waiting for something to come open, but also comfortable stepping up in the pocket into that pressure. We saw him duck out and make some moves with his legs. There was one play, I think it was in the third or fourth quarter, where he almost got tripped up, like somebody was coming after him and had him by the leg, and he got out of it. And it's just like, wow, we're not used to seeing that out of Sam Darnold. We're used to seeing him either, do the Kirk Cousins thing and just take an awful sack, or throw a really awful interception, kind of like a la Nick Mullins or Josh Dobbs.
Exactly, yep.
And this was not that from him. It was nice to see. It was refreshing.
Oh yeah, there was. I think there were 2 similar plays where, but one specifically where he was like getting sacked. He was like, the pocket had totally closed around him, and he like spun out of it and ran. On the one I'm talking about, ran to his right side and just quick dumped it off. And I don't remember who caught it. I'm not going to be able to remember, but it ended up being like a first down after like 15 or so yards. And you text me, and it's like, man, that same play was either a sack, fumble last week or an interception last week. Like, it did seem like Sam Darnold won. Yes, I think he had his highest PFF grade either of the season or of his career, or both. Just in this past game against the Titans. But also, it definitely seemed like, so in the Jaguars game, Sam Darnold, he looked flustered. He looked lost. He looked like the epitome of that famous clip of him as a Jet on the sideline saying, I'm seeing ghosts out here. Against the Jaguars, Darnold did not look good. And it was one of those games where I think I even said it on the podcast, Darnold was super lucky that J.J. McCarthy is not healthy and not a good option to bench Darnold for. And we saw Kevin O'Connell after the Jaguars game last week kind of say things like, hey, we don't doubt this guy for a second. We're behind him totally. He double, triple, quadrupled down on Sam Darnold, and it was kind of weird. But this week, I think you even texted it to me, it seemed like Sam Darnold was very intentional throughout the week about what other decisions could I make in this scenario. Rather than throw a desperation pass to Justin Jefferson and ultimately get an interception, could I just take the sack, or could I run it for 2 yards, or could I maybe dump it down to option 2 or 3? Like, Sam Darnold against the Titans this week looked like he had put a lot of time and effort and mental headspace into getting rid of those errors. And at least for this week, it worked.
Yeah, so friend of the show, Dustin Baker, who we need to have back on.
Yeah, we do. I messaged him, I think sometime soon. Keep your eyes peeled for Dustin Baker on the Skol.
We'll circle back around with him. But anyways, he put out a really interesting tweet today, stacking up a lot of Vikings quarterbacks through the last, I think, 15 years. When it comes to a very specific stat, EPA plus CPOE. And I know what EPA means. I think it's estimated points added.
I don't know what either of them mean. I just know those are both good stats.
Yeah, I don't
know.
I don't know CPOE. It's kind of beyond my thing. But I trust Dustin Baker. He has really good stuff. He's compiled a list of Vikings quarterbacks in the last 15 years through 11 weeks. And currently, Sam Darnold ranks 4th among all those quarterbacks in the last 15 years. That's impressive. You've got Brett Favre in 2009 at the top of that list. You have Kirk Cousins in 2020, Kirk Cousins in 2019, and then you've got Sam Darnold. And then you've got Kirk Cousins from last season before he got hurt. It's just marginally below Sam Darnold. So he's in really good company. And this is all 11 games, or all 10 games, 11 weeks that the Vikings have played so far. So we really can't complain about Sam Darnold, and we can't complain about the price tag either.
Oh my gosh, it's still a steal.
Yeah.
He could have thrown 2 interceptions in the Titans game, and it still would have been a steal. $10 million for, a top 15 quarterback, and that's what he's playing like, is at least a top 15 quarterback. He'll get way more next year, but yeah, you're right. There's nothing to complain about so far.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, one more thought on Sam Darnold. I don't know if it was today or yesterday that I texted you. It was another Dustin Baker tweet where he was basically saying, hey, just a reminder that every single one of us would be jumping for joy if J.J. McCarthy had the exact same stat sheet. Everything was the same. It's just J.J. McCarthy. If he was playing exactly the same as Sam Darnold is right now, we'd be saying, yes, the future is solved. He's going to get even better. It's going to be amazing. And right now, it kind of feels like Sam Darnold's like, okay, I guess we'll wait for J.J. McCarthy. Like, we should be very happy right now.
And I was thinking about it after you sent that to me too, that yes, we would probably be that way with J.J. McCarthy. And we would also be that way if J.J. McCarthy was putting up those numbers and the Vikings had 3 wins or 4 wins through 11 games. We'd be through the moon. We'd be like, all right, this isn't our year, but we're just going to get a good draft pick and 2025, baby. Let's do this.
Yeah. So to go off on a little bit of a tangent, and I hope we can just make this like a minute. This idea kind of came to me today. This thought came to me today, and I think I've been seeing it pump up a little bit more on social media. At this point, which team do you think is better? The 2024 Minnesota Vikings or the 2022 Minnesota Vikings?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I still have to go with the 24 Vikings.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why?
I think the defense is better. I think the Brian Flores led defense. It's now the second year under Flores, right? And you've got the monster of the 3 linebackers just terrorizing defenses. And not to spoil what we're about to talk about, but man, those 3 played amazing. The linebacking crew in general played great. The secondary, not so much, but the linebackers played awesome. And yeah, I think offensively, you don't have to worry about Kirk Cousins and the drama with, will they re-sign him? Will he stick around for another year? Will we extend him and make him the highest paid quarterback in the league? I don't know. I like the 24 Vikings better than the 22 Vikings.
And before you answered it, I already knew my answer. I agree with you. I think 24 so far feels better than 2022. You could argue that the 22 Vikings offense was in a better spot, a little bit better spot. But outside of that, the defense is much better. Remember, it was a joke in 2022, or maybe this was 2021. Maybe I'm mixing up, that at the end of the first and second half, so like 2 minutes of the halves, the Vikings were going to let the other team score. I think that might be 2021. But anyways, the defense for 24 is way better than the defense for 22. And the special teams, I mean, we don't have... Ryan Wright played an amazing rookie year in 22, but he seems to be back to that form. Mm-hmm. And when he's healthy, Will Reichard seems like he's playing like the best kicker in the league. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think 24 so far is better than 22.
And one more thing, just on the 22 Vikings, they were kind of the comeback kids that year. I mean, I forget how many, like, either come from behind wins or how many, like, one-score wins they had. I'm just looking over at the biggest comeback in NFL history pennant that we've got on the wall there. Like, that was one of those games where it was one score, it went into overtime, and I don't know. The Vikings haven't had many games like that this year. They've won by a few, and they've had a few close calls. The Packers game was close there at the end.
The Colts game, the second half, they had to fight back a little bit.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not like the Vikings are blowing out their opponents like we wish they would.
Yeah.
But they're offensively, I think, a little more astute. I think Kevin O'Connell is a better play caller now than he was 2 years ago.
And he's just going to keep getting better, too.
Yep.
All right. Continuing with Roses, I guess for me, you mentioned it earlier, the Vikings defense, specifically Cashman, Van Ginkel, and Jonathan Grenard. Those guys are monsters.
Yes.
Those guys are three of the best players on the team, and they're first-year Vikings brought in by KOC, or not, well, kind of KOC, but brought in by Kwesi. The defense is definitely the reason, more so than the offense, that the Vikings are 8-2 at this moment. They kind of disappeared for a few games there, but they seem to be back in, elite form, granted against some lower level of competition. But I'm very excited about this defense. I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this defense. Here's a stat for you. Van Ginkel, he had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. Pretty sweet, huh? Pat Jones also had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. Pat Jones just suddenly appeared against the Titans after a few weeks.
Defensive game ball winner, like weeks 1, 2, and 3, maybe. And then he just like disappeared, almost Dallas Turner-esque,
I wonder, and this is pure speculation that does no good for anybody, but I wonder if he was kind of told, like, yeah, you're on the trade block. Like, if we can find a good value, if we can get a good deal, you might be gone. So I wonder if that kind of got in his head a little bit and maybe affected him a little bit. And then ultimately he didn't get traded. But you never know what's said or planned for behind closed doors. For all we know, he was never on the trade block, and they're just content to let him be a Viking this year and then get a big payday next year. But I don't know. There seemed to be something that maybe he had an injury that wasn't really talked about. Maybe just a sore ankle or something. I don't know. But he seems to be back now.
And honestly, it could just be coaching too, because I think Brian Flores was quoted on Dallas Turner's relative quietness right now in the Vikings defense. He was strong there for a few games and then quiet for a long time. And then I think he splashed again against Jacksonville
and then quiet again. Yeah, you're right. And then quiet again against the Titans.
And then I don't think he was really on the field much. And he was quoted after the game saying, I'm going with the hot hand. I'm going to ride the hot hand. Whoever's hot at the moment, they're going to get in. And maybe that's Pat Jones. Maybe Brian Flores is seeing some stuff in practice throughout the week that he's like, yeah, he's going to get some snaps and we're going to see what he can do. And he must have made the most of it because he got 2 sacks and 3 TFLs, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So the defense for me is the most exciting part of the team for me. And defense wins championships. So let's hope they keep it going.
Yeah. I think a final rose before we get to the thorns here is the Vikings just notched another win. And
they keep doing it.
I think as of right now, they're kind of a lock to make the playoffs. I don't know that they are the number 1 seed, although we might make another video like we did last year. I might make another video like I did last year, just manipulating the playoff machine, seeing if we can get the Vikings into that number 1 seed just for fun, and see how many haters we can get in the comments and how many people are like, oh, you're so delusional. Well, read the description, man. It's just all in jest. But anyways, the Vikings should still make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to go 1-6 or 2-5. I think they have 3 or 4 more wins in them at least to get them to 11 or 12 wins. And that would get pretty close to your preseason prediction of 12-5, right?
I think I said 11.
Did you say 11?
Either way, if I said 12, I would still stand by it right now.
You said 11.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I think I'm still figuring that, or I'm still standing behind that. While you have it up, the rest of the season, what did I say for wins and losses?
So you say win against the Bears.
Okay.
Lose to the Cardinals. Win against the Falcons. Win against the Bears at home on Monday night. Win at Seattle. Lose to Green Bay at home. And then win at Detroit in Week 18.
Hey, I don't think it's outright delusional to think that all of those could happen the way you just read it off.
You're not wrong.
Is it 100% lock? No, not by any means. Is the Detroit game at the last game of the season going to be freaking difficult? Yes, that might be the hardest game the Vikings have left. But it's not delusional to think that they could beat, or they could do everything that I said they would do in that list there.
Something that I spent a little time looking at, and I didn't dive super deep into this, but the Lions still have some tough games ahead of them too. The Lions have to play the Niners, and I think the Niners, although they're at the bottom of the NFC West right now, that NFC West is wide open.
Oh, yeah.
I think they have 3 teams that are like 5-5 or something like that. And yeah, it's anybody's race at this point. I think anybody in that division could win it. So they've got to play the Niners, and I think the Niners are hungry for a win. They also have to play the Bills, and the Bills just beat the Chiefs, who are the last remaining undefeated team in the league. And the Chiefs don't look like the Chiefs right now.
Yeah,
That's obvious, and the Bills kind of handled them. But I don't know. I think the Lions sustain a few more losses before the end of the season. I don't think they finish the season with 1 loss.
Well, just to look at it quick, and I'll let you react as I read them. The Lions rest of the season. This coming week they play the Colts.
They'll win that one.
Okay, and then they play the Bears.
They should win that one. It's at home.
Yep, and then they play the Packers.
That'll be an interesting one. The Packers are kind of scrappy, but I still think Detroit's a way stronger team in all phases.
Then they play the Bills.
That's going to be one to circle, and I think that's a really close game, and I'm going to say the Bills win that one.
To go back a little bit, and good point, but that Packers-Lions game, that's on Thursday Night Football, December 5th. So that
short week.
Thursday definitely adds a factor that
sure doesn't
seem like any other time slot adds to it. So definitely something to look at. So Packers-Bills, that you say the Bills could beat the Lions there?
I think the Bills beat the Lions there. Yep.
Okay, so then the Lions take on the Bears again after the Bills.
Is that one at Soldier Field?
Google says Soldier Field, yeah.
I don't know. That's an interesting one, too. I don't know. The Bears aren't playing great right now, but there's some home field advantage, and the Lions are a dome team playing outdoors
in late December. Yeah,
late December. So I don't know. That's an interesting one, too. I still think the Lions eke it out.
Okay. After the Bears game, the Lions go to the 49ers the next Monday Night Football game.
And that, I think, is also a loss.
Interesting.
I don't think a lot of people will say that the Lions will lose to San Francisco right now, but I'm saying yes for a few reasons. One, San Francisco is just going to be hungry for a win. It's a home game for them. Did I see it's a primetime game too, or is it just a late?
Monday Night Football, yep.
Monday Night Football. So it's primetime. And Midwest/East Coast teams don't typically do well going west.
Definitely factors, yeah.
So,
and then, of course, after that Niners game, the Lions host the Vikings to end the regular season.
And that's going to be a one to circle.
So you said, I'll say that you said definitely potentially 2 losses.
2 more losses, yeah.
For the Lions. And if the Vikings only have 1 more loss in their season, like I preseason predicted, that means the Vikings are heading into that Lions game week 18 tied for the division lead with the Lions, and whoever wins that not only wins the NFC North but potentially earns the number 1 seed.
Yep.
Again, so many things can happen in 7 games. We could be laughing about the Vikings having a chance to beat the Lions here in 6 weeks. I mean, one injury, Sam Darnold going down, totally changes the rest of the season. Or
injuries could pile up, and there could be several injuries to some, linemen or some other players that you're not expecting. And it could definitely be a much different story in late December and early January. So,
yep. All of that to say, I think you hit the nail on the head with your final rose there, that it is nice the Vikings keep winning. Yeah, you can have a boring win against the Titans where maybe you can poke a few holes in the Vikings' strength here. That 98-yard touchdown pass by Will Levis is not fun to see, but they're professional athletes too. They win a play here and there. I agree with you. I think the Vikings are definitely going to make the playoffs, whether they're the 1 seed or the 5 seed, which that looks like the only options right now. And I think they're going to kind of bowl through the rest of their schedule, 1 or 2 games here and there that might be more difficult. Make no mistake, we are not saying the Vikings are better than the Lions. The Lions are the team to beat, I think, in the NFL. I think anyone with eyes right now should be able to say that confidently, that the Lions are the best team right now.
Their Super Bowl odds skyrocketed after the Chiefs lost last night, too. So,
and especially when you look the Vikings' last opponent, they only beat them by, what was the score? 23-13. The Vikings beat them by 10, whereas the Lions, when they played the Titans just a few weeks ago, they beat them by like 40 plus. So if you're comparing apples to apples, I
would still like to point out that the Vikings held the Lions to a relatively low point total. 31-29, I think, was the score when the Vikings hosted the Lions earlier this season. So that Week 18 game has so much in it, and I think it will be, and I don't know, maybe there is a script writer out there. They have to have that one circled, and they have to maybe be building this crescendo towards that climactic moment of that Week 18 NFC North clash between the Vikings and the Lions.
Yeah, if that's one that could be flexed, I think they'll look long and hard at flexing that out of a noon slot. But
it's already an option to flex.
Oh yeah,
like it's on the calendar as TBD, and they'll flex
true.
it if they. And I fully expect them to, if the Vikings and Lions are in any sort of meaningful situation where it could decide the number 1 seed, or it could decide the division winner, or both. You never know.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say, too, to kind of wrap up, at least for me, this thought, yes, the Lions on paper, not only are they better than the Vikings, they're on paper better than any other team in the NFL. But and this is kind of frustrating for me. And maybe I'll just jump right into my first thorn.
You do it.
Let's do it. My first thorn from the Titans game, and really just the Vikings season overall, is that the Vikings seem to be playing up or down to their level of opponent. Yes, the defense has been touted, other than those couple of weeks where they seem to disappear. The defense is elite, but overall, the team in general seems to be playing tough games against their opponent, no matter who their opponent is. And it seems like for that reason, you can say they could beat anybody on any week, and they shouldn't be favored or non-favored by too many points either way. But it is kind of frustrating to think that, like, oh yeah, the Vikings are good, they should win, but like it'll still be a close game, whether it's the Colts or the Lions. I mean, that's my biggest thorn so far for the Vikings this week and this season.
And it seems like the Vikings haven't really had a blowout game. I mean, the only blowout game that I would consider that the Vikings have had this year is against the Texans.
Okay, yeah.
34-7.
And before that, the Giants game was borderline blowout too.
The Giants game, I mean...
Well, they just benched Daniel Jones, too.
I know. Yeah, no one's going to brag about beating the Giants. Like, that's just hogwash. But when you beat the Texans 34-7, we're watching the Texans right now on Monday Night Football, and they're up by a touchdown on the Cowboys. And the Texans looked pretty good after the Vikings. They've sustained a few more losses, but...
They almost beat the Lions.
Yeah. They've had some close ones, and they've had some tough losses too. But I think they're still in position to probably win the AFC South.
Potentially, I haven't paid too close attention to the other teams, but yeah, probably.
But anyways, all that to say, other than that Texans game, the Vikings have just had a lot of close games. And you would expect, these last 3 games, the Colts, the Jags, the Titans, not great teams, lower tier of the league teams that just are not known for putting up a lot of points and are known for, like the Lions beating the Titans, I think you said it was, just giving up a ton of points to opposing offenses. So, yeah, it's a little frustrating that the Vikings can't seem to get it figured out. I think they've been figuring it out, though. I think it's part of the process. We were saying this last year, remember? If the Vikings made the playoffs last year, you said this a lot, they're going to be a dangerous team.
Oh, yeah.
Because they know how to face adversity. They know how to win tough games. And I think the same is true for this year's Vikings too. They didn't really face adversity the first 3 weeks of the season. And then they kind of had a test in London against the Jets, and then they lost 2 to the Lions and the Rams. And they overcame that, and they've overcome some injury. They went out. Kwesi helped the team by going out and getting Cam Robinson.
Such a pivotal trade, too. That one may have saved the season.
And Cam Akers to kind of step in for a flailing Ty Chandler at the running back 2 position. So, you got to give kudos to Kwesi for helping the team when they needed it. But also, you got to give props to the rest of the team and Kevin O'Connell and the coaching staff for continuing to motivate these guys to go out and play hard each and every week. I think it's a really unselfish locker room. I think they just want to win games, and I don't think anybody cares what the stat line is.
Publicly, I think... And this is me just kind of watching his interviews. I think Justin Jefferson would love to be getting more yards.
Yeah.
I think he understands the gravity of the situation, that a win is better than 100 yards receiving or even a touchdown. But I think, superstars want the ball in their hands. I realize that I just totally cut into your thought.
No,
and
not at all.
Undercut your thought process, because I do agree with you overall. But I think to say that this is totally unselfish and that nobody really cares about stats is not quite true, because I do think if you ask Justin Jefferson in his heart of hearts, if he wanted to have 20 targets and 300 yards and 5 touchdowns every game, if a receiver said, no, I don't want that, then you don't want that guy on your team.
Well, you can see it. You can see it in his body language. He got the last of the game balls in Kevin O'Connell's post-game speech to the locker room. And, he broke a record, so to speak. He's got the most yards through 5 seasons in the NFL as a receiver, both in the franchise and in the league. And he didn't really seem to care. Like, Kevin O'Connell kind of hyped it up like, yeah, he had 80-some yards today, and he's now on his way to being one of the greatest of all times.
Yeah.
And Justin gets the game ball, and he gives him a hug, but you can just tell he's like, I wanted more.
Yeah.
I wanted more.
And I know I'm kind of going against the point that I was just trying to make, but I do think truly Justin Jefferson also knows. He is the captain. He is the face of the franchise. He knows winning does mean more than 100 yards and 2 touchdowns.
For sure.
But, there's also, you're never going to say, I don't want 100 yards and 2 touchdowns or whatever. So I think there is that, he might be in that weird spot too of like, yes, I'm doing all these things statistically. I got the biggest contract ever for a non-quarterback. We're winning, so there's nothing to be complaining about. I think in this same scenario, Stephon Diggs, he might be missing a practice. He might be showing up with his hood over his head.
Oh, for sure.
So he probably is a little frustrated, or maybe disappointed is not the right word, but it's the only one that I can think of. He probably is a little disappointed in his lack of, just historical stats right now. But I think he is level-headed enough to know, like, we're winning. 8-2 is not, you don't get that every year.
Well, and I think he's maturing and he's learning, and he's been this way. That's kind of the anomaly of Justin Jefferson, is he's kind of been this way since he got into the league. He's just had a very mature personality about him anyways, both in front of the camera and on the field. And I'm sure behind the scenes too. I think he's a pretty genuine guy, but He's learning some valuable lessons. When you're the highest paid non-quarterback player in the league, you're going to attract coverage. And he's been draped like crazy. And something I was thinking about earlier today, he took a pretty nice pass interference penalty, I think in the first or second quarter against the Titans. Those things don't show up on the stat sheet. They're not credited to him as yards. If you add those things, because in the NFL now it's a spot foul, and I think that was like a 30-some yard penalty against the Titans. Like, that's 30 yards that Justin Jefferson gains. It's almost as if he caught that ball and was tackled right where he caught the ball. Unfortunately, it doesn't show up in the stat sheet that way, and he doesn't get the credit for it. But I think he's learning, like, okay, if this is my lot in life right now, that I'm just going to be double and triple teamed all over the field, and guys are going to be flailing themselves over me to try and prevent me from catching the ball because they know I'm so good, then I'm just going to do what I can to get the ball down the field and help my team get into position to score.
Still helps the team. And I think Jefferson would say, hey, I'm doing the Lord's work over here. If they got to hold me to give me more yards, that's fine.
And he did that for sure. And it put the Vikings in a good spot. So I don't know. Yes, we would all love to see Justin Jefferson get more yards, score more touchdowns, and I know he would too. But the Vikings are winning games. I don't think he's complaining. I think he's
not
just,
publicly, at least. If he is, it's all silent behind closed doors, and they're taking care of it their way.
I think he's using it as motivation. Like, all right, let's keep grinding. Let's keep going. Let's keep, let's throw a few extra balls after practice with Sam Darnold. Let's keep working on that chemistry. Let's keep fine-tuning these routes so that he can just throw it to me and I'm there and I can catch it and we can win some more games down the stretch.
We've seen what happens against the Jaguars when Sam Darnold tries to force balls to really anybody, but specifically Justin Jefferson.
All three of those picks were targets to Justin Jefferson against the Jags. So,
but all that was my thorn, is that the Vikings continue to play to the level of their opponent, and they just haven't dominated anybody for a while.
Yeah, I think a big thorn for me is this defensive secondary. They really showed some signs of weakness. Josh Metellus was the lowest graded PFF score on the team.
Yeah.
And he was the one that gave up that huge, 97 yards?
98 yard, yeah.
98 yards, whatever. Yeah. And that's not to say that he played terribly, and that guy's all over the field. And, I mean, Brian Flores is like a chemist, in the lab, and he's mixing up all sorts of stuff, and he's got Harrison Smith, who's older than we are, lining up with 2 fingers in the dirt ready to go blitz the guy one play, and then he's lining up as the strong safety on another play, and he's all over the place. So you can't fault a guy like Josh Metellus for giving up a big play like that. Unfortunately, it didn't wreck the game for the Vikings, but Harrison Smith is starting to show his age, and I think that's obvious. I don't think it's so obvious and so detrimental that he needs to be benched yet, and I think his presence on the field is huge, and I think those other guys feed off of his energy, and he still had an interception that kind of sealed the game against the Titans. So I'm not saying bench Harrison Smith.
No.
I saw something today on Twitter that said, can we just crown a Hall of Famer while they're still playing? And I think he's, one of the very few that deserves an honor like that. He's been doing it for so long. He's been so consistently good. I'm not at all trying to downplay Harrison Smith, but they showed some cracks. They showed some weaknesses in. This is a unit that has played really, really well and has a lot of interceptions on the season. Cam Bynum has a few. Byron Murphy has a few. Metellus, I think, has at least one.
I think so. Oh, yeah, he got the tip one, the one against the 49ers.
And Harrison Smith now has a few, I think, on the season.
At least the one,
Yeah, so, I mean, they're a unit that's played really well throughout the season. They did not have their best game against the Titans. The 97, 98 yarders, the one that stands out, I think, but there were several other plays that were they just kept giving up those big chunk plays, and it comes down to play calling, and I think at times Brian Flores was getting a little soft because the Vikings were up by a lot, and he was like, we're not going to press, we're going to just kind of back off and let the plays come to us. And it's also just the play of the guys too, and getting in the right position and making sure that you're ready to take on whatever comes at you. So I think the defensive secondary needs to improve. They've got to do a little soul searching and figure out how they can right the ship for the rest of the season.
I totally agree with you. But can I talk you off the ledge just a little bit on that point specifically? And I don't think I'm going to say anything that you wouldn't agree with either. I think you said this too, the Metellus 98-yard touchdown pass. I mean, he's a really good player that, I said it earlier in the episode, good players on the other team, they get paid too. That's going to happen at some point. Like he may have made one mistake, and that 98-yard touchdown may be a culmination of like 3 or 4 players making just a little bit of a mistake, or just one step when they should have taken 2 steps, or just a tenth of a second looking this way when they should have been looking that way. That could have just been a culmination of a few things. And again, I think you agree with me. It looked really bad that Metellus was the one that totally whiffed on knocking the ball down, and it went for 98 yards. We both know Metellus is one of the better players on the team, let alone the defense, and he's going to be just fine.
Oh yeah, not worried about him.
Also about that, and this will come up later in my game balls, but Harrison Smith, he is going off of at least his second game now of playing every defensive snap. And I mentioned this last week when I noticed that he played every snap on defense, that I thought there was something in the offseason when he like redid his deal to solidify that he was going to be on the team this year, that there was going to be some kind of, I think KOC even said something to the tune of, yeah, Harrison Smith, he's going to be, he didn't say pitch count, but the idea was that Harrison Smith was going to be on some kind of a pitch count this year and, not play every single play of every single game. And here we are. And I don't know about 3 games ago, but at least this game against the Jaguars, and I know for sure against this game against the Titans and also against the Jaguars last week, Harrison Smith played every single defensive snap for both of those games. So credit to him.
Crazy.
Yeah, credit to him for, what is he, 35, which go figure. That's not too much older than you and I, but 35 as an NFL player.
He's older than we are.
Yeah. Credit to him for continuing to be in there. And if he were playing poorly at the safety position, we would see it. We would say, like, where's Harrison Smith on that? Like, why is he the one, getting burned for a 98-yard touchdown? And maybe he did have a small part in that one. I don't know. But I do know he got the game-sealing interception.
Yes.
And I do know he is a Hall of Famer on the field currently. So I do think, and the third point of kind of talking you off the ledge about the Vikings secondary is, if you look at the Vikings defense and their rushing numbers, the numbers that teams have when they're trying to rush against the Vikings, they're not able to. The Vikings don't allow rushing yards. I think one of the only 100-yard rushers this season was Jordan Mason in like week 2 for the 49ers.
For the Niners, yeah.
The Vikings are a team that you don't successfully rush against them. Jonathan Taylor got like 30 or 40 yards. Nobody has succeeded as a rusher against the Vikings. So when you're the cartoon and you're plugging every hole of the dam, eventually the water's going to come out somewhere. And I think that's just teams saying, okay, we can't rush against you. Maybe we can throw a quick pass. Maybe we can gain a few garbage time passing yards. And so offenses are going to win somehow. They're going to find some way to gain yards and move the ball. And if you're going to try to do that, at least one way you're able to do it against the 2024 Vikings is maybe throw the ball a few times, but you're still not going to score very often. So just to kind of pull you away from the ledge, not that you were saying this is a terrible team and it's the secondary's fault, but I think it's one of those definitions of bend, don't break. Yeah, they're bending with the passing yardage against, but they're not breaking. I
would, just to kind of counter the argument a little bit, I don't know that the secondary, and I don't have the stats to back this up.
You tried. I saw you looking for some numbers there.
This is just anecdotal. Well, I wasn't looking for those numbers specifically, but anecdotal. I watched the game. Mm-hmm. I think the linebacking core and the defensive line are really to credit for stopping the run game against the Titans.
Absolutely.
Not to say that the safeties and the corners weren't involved. Of course they were. They have to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they all had some rushing tackles. Again, I don't have concrete numbers to look at, but I think the line and the linebackers played better than the secondary. Sure. That's the point I'm trying to make. And we've seen this defense play well in all three levels. We've seen them play well in the trenches. We've seen those backers play really well. We've seen these safeties and corners play really well. I think we're kind of getting out of this sleepy phase of the Vikings defense, and we're getting back to the Vikings defense of the early part of the season. And I think you get guys healthy. You get Harrison Smith, who's playing every single defensive snap in a game and feeling great at 35 years old.
I don't know about we'd have to hear from him if he's feeling okay. But
he must
he's
be
still out there.
He must be feeling okay if he's not saying, "Coach, take me out for a few." And you look at the injury report. He's usually on there not because he's injured, but just because veterans, I think, can. I don't know the rules on that, but they can take rest days.
I've seen the official injury reports say rest day, day off,
not injury related.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think when they reach a certain number of years of service, they get some time to just. And I'm sure I would venture to guess because as a teacher, I accumulate sick days, and I get 20 some a year or something, or not. Jeez. 20 a year. No, it's not that many. It's 5 or 10 a year, but they roll over and then they never expire. And so I can accumulate a lot. So I've got 30 banked up right now. And when I'm, 50 years old, 60 years old, I'll probably have a couple hundred.
Yeah, you'll take some of those too.
So yeah. But anyways, I don't know if that's how it works for NFL players, but I mean, man, guys like him deserve it if he can come out and play like he does. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not saying that he's the problem, and I'm not saying that the secondary's the problem. I'm just saying they showed some signs of weakness. I think they can tighten up, and I think this defense can be suffocating like they have been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So. I just had, for me, one more thorn, and for me, it's Jalen Nailor. Yeah. Maybe I'm too critical, maybe not, but Ryan Bozer on Twitter had a really good tweet, kind of encapsulating my thoughts on Jalen Nailor, kind of listing out that he had a muff punt against Green Bay, which was the catalyst to changing that game from a blowout to a really close game. He had a fumble, scoop score versus Detroit that was overturned. Game-changing drop against the Rams. Remember, Darnold was kind of running for his life, and he dumped it off for a 3 or 4 yard pass that would have been a first down, maybe a touchdown, but Nailor had it in his arms, and he just dropped it. And then Ryan Bozer said that he went full Troy Williamson in Tennessee with that huge, beautiful, maybe the best pass of Sam Darnold's professional career that just dropped at the goal line into Nailor's hands, and it did. It's like Nailor was pretending to be a basketball hoop. The ball went straight in. They should have given Sam Darnold 2 points for that.
3 points.
But I replied to that with downtown. The Skol hop. And 3 points, you're right. I replied to that and said, never go full Troy Williamson. But Bozer finished it by saying he makes some good plays, but the negatives outweigh the positives. And he says cut his snaps. And I think a combination of Brandon Powell and Trent Sherfield.
Sherfield's played well.
Yeah, but the combination of those two are better as a wide receiver 3 than Jalen Nailor is, just because he seems to crumble in the few opportunities he's getting. Well, and I'm ready for Nailor to move on.
And you've said this. I think Dustin Baker has said this on his show and our show before. TJ Hawkinson effectively plays that wide receiver 3 role anyways, and he's kind of been mysteriously
he's
quiet.
Still working in. I mean, he had a life-changing injury, TJ Hawkinson did, and we're still getting some uptick in value really since TJ Hawkinson came in from Josh Oliver, who's had a career year so far.
Yeah, for sure, and not negating any of that at all. But I guess when it comes to, we've got Jalen Nailor who's struggling and he can make some plays. Well, if you're Kevin O'Connell, the plays that would go to him, see if you can find something to get to TJ, you know, work him into those spots where you were going to Jalen Nailor before. Continue to try to feed Justin Jefferson the ball because he's your playmaker. Yeah. Continue to find Jordan Addison like you did for 47 yards in the first quarter. That was awesome. And
that may be the best play of that, may be the actual best play of Sam Darnold's career.
It could very well be.
Maybe above that 98-yard touchdown or 97 or whatever, because I'll give a lot of the credit to that long bomb to Justin Jefferson because he's the one that he caught it in.
He kind of weaved his way and got into the end zone down there at the end.
Darnold, and taking nothing away from Jordan Addison on that touchdown, he made it happen. But Darnold, that may be the best quarterbacking play of his career.
Something I was talking about with my brother-in-law when he was here watching the game with us. Jordan Addison, he's kind of that deep ball threat, and that's kind of his game.
Mm-hmm.
He can run the route tree, and if you give him some routes, he'll find it. He can do some of those crossing routes and get open in the middle, but he excels those long downfield passes, and I think that's what he wants. And I think that's I think that was the motivation behind this whole free 3 thing was.
Well, and you've said it too. He's been saying that for years.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not trying to justify what he's saying, but I think he knows that he's that downfield threat. He's the deep ball guy. He's the shorter, quieter Randy Moss.
Yeah, he is pretty fluid on those longer, deeper routes. The only times we've really complained about him is we've perceived those quick scat-y routes where he's supposed to run 5 yards and cut in. We've perceived that he's running them incorrectly, and maybe that's true, but when he seems to be like the highlight reel is when he's like just cutting through and just going deep. And like you're just saying, he's the deep ball guy.
And I think the difference between him and Justin Jefferson is the all-in wide receiver. He can do it all. He can play out of the slot. He can play out wide. He can run those quick out routes. He can run those quick in routes.
Mm-hmm.
He can run those post routes. He can run everything. Justin Jefferson has the entire route tree at his disposal, and you put the ball within 5 yards of him and he's probably going to come down with it.
Yep.
We don't see very many plays where he doesn't, and we've seen Sam Darnold try to force it to him, and I think those are more on Sam Darnold than they are on Justin Jefferson, honestly.
You remember when Jefferson was drafted? Before you and I or anybody who only follows professional football knew anything about him, we were just hearing, oh, Jefferson, he'll be a good slot receiver. Mm-hmm. He'll be a decent, inside guy. Nobody, at least on our thought process, thought he would turn into the next Randy Moss, the next face of the league. But how great is it that he has?
Yeah, and so cool that he's just such a great guy to back it up. Like he's got a great personality, and he's staying out of trouble, at least for the most part right now. And you can't complain about a guy like that.
But yeah, all that to say, I'm going to advocate for a combination of Brandon Powell, who made a freaking amazing catch, maybe the best catch of his career, saving it from the ground. A combination of Brandon Powell and Trent Sherfield to really take all of the snaps that Jalen Nailor would have taken. I'd be okay with Jalen Nailor not playing again on offense.
And I would advocate for more passes to TJ Hawkins.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. Any other thorns for you, or are we going to game balls?
Let's hand out some game balls. Offense, who are you going with?
All right, my offensive game ball, just because it seems like we've got what should be back to normal for Vikings version of Sam Darnold. He's my offensive game ball.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to say no turnovers. Yes, that pitch fumble to Aaron Jones on the first drive of the game was technically credited to Sam Darnold, maybe even his fault. Maybe it wasn't 100% great pitch, but outside of that, I'm comfortable enough saying no turnovers for him, especially after throwing 3 picks to the Jaguars the week before, 4 that one didn't count. He looked great. Best game of his Vikings career, I think, and seems like he has made an effort to correct the issues that were popping up in this lull period. I think he's earned it. Sam Darnold, my Vikings game ball on offense this week.
I'm going Jordan Addison. That 47-yard touchdown was awesome. You said it was maybe Sam Darnold's best throw of his career. It might be one of Jordan Addison's best plays of his career. And again, we just got done talking about him. He might be not as multifaceted as Justin Jefferson, but I still think he's a really good receiver, really good player, and he makes plays. Yeah. And you can't, I think was he the only receiving touchdown? No, Cam Akers had a receiving touchdown as well. But yeah, Justin Jefferson's probably frustrated that he doesn't have as many touchdowns as he could this year. But
Jefferson's also never been a touchdown machine. No. He gets 5, 6, 7, 8. He's not a 20 touchdown guy. He's just really good. He will be at some point. He'll get a 20 touchdown year. But yeah, I agree with that.
Jordan Addison, he gets my offensive game ball.
Yep. For defense, for me, I said it earlier, Harrison Smith played every single defensive snap. The guy is a living, breathing Hall of Famer. I saw that tweet too. I wish I remembered who it was that said, can we just induct guys when they're still in? I wonder, is there another sport? I feel like NASCAR, you can be inducted before coming in. Who was the Redskins coach that was inducted and then years later came back as a coach again? Joe Gibbs or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Anyways, like if Harrison Smith doesn't get first ballot Hall of Fame, I no longer care about the Hall of Fame. Like, that's ridiculous. Kind of like Jim Marshall not being in and Chuck Foreman not being in. That's egregious. All three of those guys should be in right now. And I know Harrison Smith is still an active player. I know that's against the rules, but he should be in.
Those other two, though, are crimes, actually. Like, that's criminal.
How do those guys not get in? There's tons of guys in the Hall of Fame that are not as deserving as Jim Marshall and Chuck Foreman.
I agree.
They're in. Anyways, Harrison Smith, my defensive game ball.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to give 3 defensive game balls.
Oh, no.
I'm going to go Van Ginkel and Pat Jones for reasons we've already mentioned. They both had 2 sacks. They both had 3 tackles for loss.
Okay.
It was nice to see Pat Jones. He's kind of my guy. I like Pat Jones.
Oh, yeah, I like him too.
He was kind of my early season defensive game ball guy. He started hot and then he kind of quieted down, like we said. But he's come back in this game, and that was fun to watch. Blake Cashman, though, it's hard to underestimate his presence on the field because when he was gone, the Vikings defense seemed to struggle. Mm-hmm. And
he was gone for 3 games, and the Vikings lost 2 of them.
Yeah. So, again, it's hard to underestimate his presence on the field, and that's why he's got to get a ball from me. Like, he's a quiet leader. He's got the green dot, so he's kind of quarterbacking the defense. I think there's a lot of trust there with Brian Flores. I think he's I don't know. Blake Cashman.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on Blake Cashman. Well, the other 2 guys too, but I've said it before. I think Blake Cashman is the heartbeat of this Vikings defense. We've seen how different and worse this team looks when he's not on the field, and how much better the defense. We're saying it. The defense is back. I wonder what changed. Oh, Blake Cashman came back. That's why. And the other 2 guys you said, Van Ginkel and Pat Jones. Do you remember? Excuse me, I had a burp. Right before the season, we had Dustin Baker on, and I kind of brought up the question of, like, who would you be surprised the most or the least about if these players were cut? And some of the players, I think I listed like 5 players, and a few of them were cut, like Lewisine and a couple other guys. But one of them was Pat Jones, and I'm pretty sure I said I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pat Jones was cut. I think he was my second least surprising player to be cut, and I'm happy to be wrong. Hey, the guy's been balling out on the games he's been balling out for, which is more often than not. I'm a Pat Jones fan. I'm realistic. I know he will probably get signed for bigger and better money to a different team next year, and good for him. But if the Vikings somehow could keep him without, totally hamstringing their cap, I'd be okay with it. Although they do have Dallas Turner in waiting to kind of fill up whatever role would be left by Pat Jones.
I think his quietness, Dallas Turner's quietness, is largely due to just so much depth ahead of him.
Like, who are you going to take off the field?
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I like this defense, and I think there's so much more to tap into on this defense. I'm excited to see how they play down the stretch here.
Yep. One really exciting thing is that Blake Cashman, he is signed to be a Viking through 2026.
Oh, that's
so this year, next year, and the year after. So he'll be the heart of the defense, hopefully, for at least this season and 2 more beyond that. So that's
Love it.
Something to be happy about.
Skol. All right, special teams game ball.
My special teams game ball, Ryan Wright. I think of the three, because you got your kicker, your punter, and your long snapper are the traditional like three, special teamers that would get this ball. Ryan Wright, in the heart of the other two guys going down and having to work with two other guys out of nowhere, Ryan Wright has not only in that time period, the last two games, played very well. I think he had his best punt of the season against the Titans here, but also he had a rough season last year, and it seems like he's bounced back. I think he dropped a few pounds, which as a punter, I don't know how much that really matters, but he definitely seems to have taken to heart the idea that, hey, they brought in a guy, and not just some like random dude, like a guy that almost made his team the year before, and I had actual competition. And Ryan Wright, he played great against the Titans, and I think he's been having a great year so far.
Yeah, I'm going to give mine to Jake McQuaid, mostly because we really haven't heard his name, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
When you have a new long snapper, and when you've had a long snapper like the Vikings have had in Andrew DePaula for a long time.
All pro. First team all pro, yeah.
Has been very consistent, very good at what he does. When he goes down and you bring in someone else like Jake McQuaid, and you don't hear his name, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I think he deserves a game ball for that. Just super consistent. Getting the ball into the hands of your specialists and letting them do what they do, that's awesome. And we really haven't had to worry about, oh, no, here we go, we're going to punt. This could be bad. Or, oh, no, we're going to kick a field goal. This could go horribly wrong. We haven't had to say that. He's put the ball right where it needs to be. He got a little excited, I think, on his first one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Last week against the Jags. But other than that, he's been solid.
Well, and some sneaky talking point about that one too is he's technically on the practice squad. Jake McQuaid is, and he has one more elevation, because you can elevate guys on the practice squad, I think 3 times before you have to sign them to have them elevated again. You can keep them on the practice squad after those 3 times. It's just you can't elevate them to play in a game unless you sign them to the 53-man roster. So,
not to sidetrack you, but Brandon Aubrey just made a 64-yard field goal.
God, there's a flag.
But there's a flag on.
So 64 would tie for the second longest field goal in NFL history, because I think Tucker made a 66-yarder within the last year or two.
Anyways, we're distracted.
Yeah, but Jake McQuaid, he's on the practice squad. He can be called up, I think by rule, one more time here this week against the Bears. And after that, even if DePaula was healthy, he can't come back because
he's on IR.
And that's
4 games.
Yep, minimum 4 games. And I don't know. I haven't heard anything about DePaula if he's going to be... Oh, man, we're distracted by this penalty on the kick.
The personal foul against the Cowboys.
So it looks like... Yeah, the Cowboys kicked a 64-yard kick and made it, but there was a personal foul, I thought they were saying, on the Texans, which gave the Cowboys a first down and took off the 3 points for that kick. Oh, is it roughing the kicker? Running into the kicker? Something. I don't know. This is outdated information by the time it's hitting your ears anyways. Oh, it's
going over the line.
This long snapper. As we're talking about a long snapper, too.
Yeah, how appropriate.
But yeah, the Vikings will have to figure something out against... Who's the game after the Bears?
For the Vikings?
Yeah.
We already talked about this. The Cardinals.
So for the Cardinals, the Vikings will either need to sign Jake McQuaid to the 53-man roster and cut somebody else, or keep McQuaid on the practice squad and sign a different long snapper and cut somebody else, or just cut McQuaid from the practice squad, sign a different long snapper to the practice squad, and then they could elevate that guy. So there's some interesting things to long snapper wise to
or
figure
see
out.
If there's a guy on the roster that can fill the gap until DePaul is ready to come back against the Falcons. It would be the following week.
Yeah, so all that would depend on a few things. If DePaul is ready to go for after those 4 games, and then I guess that would be against the Falcons. Because if he's ready to go, then you just cut McQuaid, you sign a different guy that you can elevate for 1 week, and you just roll with it. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works. But yeah, his game ball, he's your special teams game ball?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, especially, I guess I didn't even really know all of the practice squad ins and outs that you just very succinctly described. I didn't know
it doesn't
that.
matter for the game.
Well, but I didn't know that, and that's good information. So yeah, he gets my game ball for more than one reason now, because I mean he's literally going week to week.
Yeah,
my job is week to week, and I could be cut at any moment. Ooh, there's